My slap on the wrist for leaving pilot training was they assigned me as a 13 Sierra, which is a nuclear missile officer. So they took me out of the sky and they put me 100 feet underground. So I spent the rest of my career as a nuclear missile officer. I was successful as a nuclear missile officer, which won me some awards, won me some recognition, et cetera, et cetera. So it turned out to be a good thing, but it was definitely humbling to realize that I had pissed off like senior Air Force command and had to get penalized all the way to the bottom of the shoebox.
You're going to the bunker. Yeah. What does a nuke officer do?
So there's, it's one of those things that I didn't realize what we did either until I learned it. So the launch control capsule, or the LCC, is where your missileers actually sit, which is geographically separate from the missiles themselves. So I always thought that if you sat in a silo, it's like you sat in a silo next to a missile. That's not how it works. The missileers, missile officers, what they do is they manually process codes that come in called emergency action messages, EAMs. They process these alphanumeric codes. They translate them through a manual processing system into a different alphanumeric code. And then they program that code manually into a system that translates it through an encrypted cipher into an action. And you never know what your action is. So really what a nuclear missile officer is a manual step between two automated steps that lead in the process of either launching or not launching a nuclear missile. Sometimes they're retargeting the missile. Sometimes they're doing a maintenance check on the missile. You never know what action you're actually doing. All you know is that you do the manual step of translating one alphanumeric into another alphanumeric according to a pre-existing process.
And so in terms of the process of, let's say a nuke is going to be fired on an enemy combatant for real, what does that process look like? So
that is exactly why the process, like the step that we have, that's why it's built the way it's built. Because it's built so that you can't be a conscientious objector. If the president decides to launch a nuke, let's say on Syria, he's going to have a briefcase, a nuclear football. Inside that, there is a transmitter and there's a plastic card, like if you think of like a oversized playing card that's made of plastic. He cracks the card across a seam and pulls out a 6, 10, 12-digit alphanumeric code. And then the football case is a transmitter, so he can type this alphanumeric code into the transmitter. That is a launch code. So anytime you hear about launch codes, that's the launch code. It's in the briefcase. That transmitter then sends that code to all the nuclear bases, all the silos, everything at once. But only the nuclear silos that are targeting the target that was part of that launch code, only those missiles are activated. So that code that he types in is the emergency action message that comes across our system. It's re-encrypted in a different alphanumeric. We demodulate that alphanumeric, put it into another system that runs that alphanumeric against an classified encrypted cipher. That cipher then knows whether or not the launch code is valid, confirms which missiles are valid to launch against that launch code, and then launches the missiles. So you would never know, because remember, we're in a capsule that's geographically separate from the missiles. We don't even know if we launched. We have zero idea. We just plug it in, hit enter, plug it in, hit enter. Sometimes those codes come with a command to twist to turn your key. So sometimes you turn your key along with the alphanumeric. You never really know what you're doing.
So if one was launched, nobody would actually know if they were the ones that launched it?
Correct.
Or I mean, whoever's servicing the missile site's going to know because the fucking missile actually left, right?
Right. So the people that would know, as funny as it is, are actually the military police, whose job it is to secure the missile field because they're always driving around. They would notice when in the middle of the night, fucking 200-ton concrete block blows off and a rocket goes off. Yeah.
So with this nuclear football and the key that you cracked, which sounds like almost like a chem light.
Yeah.
Two questions with that. One, like, are there a bunch of different cards? Like, here's the Syria card, here's the New Zealand card. Not that there probably even is one. Here's the Russia card. Like, is that how it's organized?
From what I understand, there's a country code, just like when you call your cell phone. There's a country code that's always current and programmed in. So essentially, when they crack the nuclear code, they put a country code and then a valid nuclear code, and that's what translates into the system. And I'm sure there's other sublines that I was never read in on, but that's the basic unclassified version of how it all works. Okay. And to your point about, we never know. one of the things that was really humbling about that job was discovering that we're just a redundancy.
Right.
Because the nuclear missile program has to always be prepared for what to do if there is a conscientious objector, if you're sick, if you're incapacitated. Maybe this is a retaliatory launch, and the first launch already happened, and Russia killed the nuclear capsule crew. We're not even needed, right? Because the reason that code gets sent worldwide to all nuclear bases is because if you and I are in one capsule and we have our 10 missiles, and our 10 missiles have 3 warheads each, if we're incapacitated because we're fighting or we're sick or we got blown up by the Russians, our missiles are still live. So now somebody else's crew 200 miles away, when they execute on that valid launch code, our missiles will launch because somebody else's crew validated the launch code. Yeah. And then if every ground crew everywhere was neutralized simultaneously because they poisoned the water, let's say, right? If everybody was incapacitated, they'd fly a fucking plane over our heads with 2 people in it who would send a validated code remotely to all the nuclear weapons, and the right ones would launch. Like, you're a redundancy of a redundancy of a redundancy. Classic military protocols, humbling, but also kind of genius.
Yeah. Well, genius in terms of making sure it happens under any circumstance.
Yeah.
The football, who's actually carrying it?
So that's a big question I've always wondered too. The president doesn't actually carry it. Somebody on the president's staff actually carries it, but I don't know I don't know what the name or title of that person is. Yeah. And like, we've all seen the president at the Rose Garden, in the Oval Office. Like, we've all seen the president without seeing a person carrying a football.
Yeah, you never see anybody carrying a fucking briefcase or whatever.
So it makes me wonder who that person is. It would also make sense that there's probably a protocol in place. So that person is always behind a camera. That person is always within 50 feet or something like that, but maybe not always on top of the president.
Would there be an Air Force guy or an Air Force officer that's servicing the football?
Yeah. So I would anticipate either it's a Department of Energy official, sworn Department of Energy officer, or a sworn U.S. Air Force officer, or a sworn U.S. Navy officer. Yeah. And I say that, plainclothes officers. I say that because the only 3 arms of the real nuclear triad are ground-based missiles controlled by the Air Force.
Submarines.
Yep. Sea-based missiles controlled by the Navy. And the Department of Energy is actually the federal oversight for all nuclear weapons and all nuclear energy generation. So people don't realize that either. DOE is actually the primary. So those 3 would be the only people I would imagine they'd put in charge of that football. Yeah.